Hello and welcome to your practice. Today we are going to be indwelling the psoas muscles. If you have been a part of this studio for a while, you will probably know that I love the psoas muscles, and so much of my understanding of them has come from the work of Liz Cook, and also a training I did with Bree and Lauren called What the Psoas, probably about a year ago. And what I really love about the psoas is that it is a responsive muscle. So if I were to tell you to flex your bicep, you could kind of do this maybe and flex your bicep depending on your body. If I were to say flex your psoas, that is not something we consciously do. The psoas responds to the state of our nervous system, to our breath, to so many other cues that it is getting. And it's nicknamed our fight-flight muscle because it is the only muscle that connects our lower legs, or our legs, it connects to our upper legs, but it is the only muscle that connects our legs via our femur bone to our back. So we need our psoas muscle to do any type of this movement. So if we need a run or kick or curl or any survival movement that our bodies might want to make, we will do this. And what's really important is that our nervous system does not know story. So our nervous system does not know how to differentiate the stress of a difficult work week and the stress of being chased by a lion. So no matter what the stress is, if we feel it in our body, we're going to experience it in our psoas muscles. And so I think of our psoas muscles as sort of a litmus test for how the rest of us are doing. And of course, nothing is this reductionistic, and unfortunately the psoas muscles have been kind of named like the culprit as though they're the cause. But I think that's unkind to do to our psoas muscles. They are not the culprit, they are a symptom. If we have a weak or a brittle or a fatigued psoas muscle, that is a symptom of something else. It could be a symptom of us not using the muscles around the psoas to help us engage it in certain ways. It could be a symptom of us living in chronic stress. And it could be a symptom of unresolved trauma in our body. And I just finished one of my cohorts for the Embodied Sexuality Process group. And the final module is all about movement. And we were talking about our hips and our pelvis and why I think it's important to move in ways that are societally designated as sexy, even if we're not wanting to be sexy, even if it doesn't feel sexy, and also I don't think should be always inherently sexualized. I think moving our hips is moving our hips. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's been reduced to sexuality, which has been, for many folks who grew up in Christian supremacy or certain other religious supremacy, there is a constriction and a tightness in our hips. And so we can, I believe, become traumatized by these societal messages and by dogma that make us clench and tighten. And so this practice today, it is not about forcing anything. It's not about stretching the psoas. In fact, I don't necessarily recommend stretching the psoas, although we will do exercises that can help us potentially lengthen it. But what I mean by I don't want us to stretch it is like we don't want to pull on it, you know? And as someone who has had chronic hip pain most of my life, I literally used to dig my elbow in to my hip, thinking that that would help. Surprise, surprise, it did not. It only made it worse. And one of the thoughts around this is that our psoas muscle is a very, very, very deep muscle. So if it is being touched, that is our body thinking that we are being exposed to a level that is life-threatening. And so we really want to be gentle with how we engage the psoas. We want to think about it as this beautiful flower that we're wanting to hydrate and nourish and allow it to flourish. We're not trying to like contort it in any way. So all of these movements and explorations are invitations for us to tap into our psoas muscle. As a reminder, I am the biggest teacher of what I learn. So I'm the biggest learner of what I teach. My brain, the sun, is making it a little numb. I am the biggest learner of what I teach. I guess I might be the biggest teacher of what I learn too, because I love to teach what I learn. But I have been actively engaging and learning and working on my relationship to my psoas for at least 8 years now. And I still feel like I'm scratching the surface of how much this muscle has to teach me. So I say that to say, if today we're doing practices and you don't feel your psoas, or you feel really confused, or it doesn't make sense, that's okay. That's a perfectly normal place to be. And the invitation is to allow it to be a practice, to continue coming back to it, to getting the head knowledge and the body knowledge. And there are teaching videos in this studio about the psoas muscle. But this practice, I know I just spent a lot of time talking to our head knowledge, but this invitation is actually to put our head knowledge on the shelf and really come into our viscera and feel into our psoas, to indwell our psoas in a particular way. So the first way that I'm going to invite us to do that is with a block. Ideally, I would have a wall on the opposite arm of the leg that's on the block, just to give me some extra support. But I'm out in the mountains. There's been no one here all day, and a car just pulled up. So I really hope that engine is not too loud and distracting. But the invitation is, if you don't have a block, you can also just do this on a step or a curb or anything that is just lifts 1 foot off of the ground. And if you have to have your toes or your heel dangling off, have your toes dangling off. So you get to place your heel firmly on the block. And then I'm going to invite you to imagine like your pointy sits bones were 2 headlights that you want on the same level. So I'm not dipping into my hip, I'm not hiking it up. I'm trying to keep those neutral-ish. And then if you have an opposite wall, even better, use that. Then the invitation is to really activate this standing leg, and then let the leg that's not on the block just swing. Front and back, front and back. And you can even use an arm to push that leg if that helps you get support. That might be a little hard as you're trying to balance. And if so, you can also switch arms that you're balancing on if you want to use the same arm as the leg to help. Just swing, swing, swing. If you wobble, you fall down. That's all part of the process. We're learning, we're practicing. And then let that go, just stepping off of the block. And then just take a moment to notice what you notice. Again, this might be one of those moments you're like, I don't notice anything. You might notice that there feels like a little bit more length in the front of your leg that was swinging. Just checking in, becoming aware. Taking as much time as you need. If you feel like you want to wiggle or shake that out, please feel free. And then we're going to just go to the other side. Again, placing the heel firmly on the block, the toes can fall over, and then we're going to step up, trying to create a neutral-ish angle with our hips. If you need to use a mirror, use a mirror. And then maybe with your arm or maybe with a loved one, you have them just gently rock this leg. The point is that your leg isn't rocking your leg. We're trying to create a little bit of length, which can sometimes create a little bit of hydration, which can create a little bit more interoception and awareness of this beautiful part in our body. And interoception is like any muscle. We can grow it and we can expand it. So again, if you're not noticing anything today, you're not noticing anything today. And that in itself is something to notice. And then go ahead and let yourself step off and then notice. You might feel like, oh, I don't notice anything. You might feel like, oh, that felt really good. I want to redo that on each side. Feel free to pause this video and do that on each side. You can do it for longer or shorter, whatever feels best in your body. But that's just one way for us to begin to connect to this part of our body. Another way that I heard Brie explain that I really liked is thinking about our psoas muscle almost like suspenders. So our psoas muscles originate right at the base of our lowest ribs in our spine. They connect from our lumbar spine. They move through our belly, through our hips, over our pelvis, and then they connect to the inside of our femur bone, of our thigh bone. So if that feels okay, with your eyes open or maybe even closed, can you just imagine that space, these two suspenders hanging from your spine down your belly and then just kind of holding on those femur bones? And if you were to create a little bit more slack in those suspenders, what happens then? Just noticing what you notice and feeling what you feel. And if it feels impossible to create more slack, or even if you just want some more support, then I'm going to invite us to do so by finding our way to the earth, taking as much time as you need to get there. And I'm going to invite us to come into a constructive rest posture. And how I often like to find that is to take one knee over my hip, and I just gently dangle and shake and wiggle that leg, then let it plop to the floor. Then I take my other knee over that hip, let it gently dangle, sway side to side, then let it plop to the floor. And you can walk your toes in or out or side to side. Find your perfect spot or your good enough spot. And then let your shoulder blades walk underneath you, opening up your heart. And you can feel free to just settle in here, remembering that our psoas is a responsive muscle. So we're going to invite different ways of potentially starting to calm our nervous system. So one way to do that is to let your forehead face up to the sky, and without turning your neck, can you let your eyes turn as far as they can over to the right? Letting your eyes look into your eye crease on the right side as far as they're able to. And then eventually you might start to notice that you take a deeper breath. You might notice a swallow or just a settling. And when you're ready, letting your eyes look back up to the sky. And then again, without turning your neck, can your eyes look all the way over to the left of your eye creases? Holding them there. And eventually, there might be a breath, a sigh, and they get to just gently roll back to center. And as you do that, maybe your eyes soften and close, maybe they stay open. If you were to check in with those suspenders, just seeing if there's any difference now after that eye engagement. You might even notice like a pulsing or a twitching. That is a lovely way that our psoas muscle is dispelling excess energy. So as long as it doesn't feel distressing for you, let your psoas muscles shake and twitch and move as much as they need to. And if you notice that there doesn't feel like more slack or spaciousness, that's okay. That in itself is something to notice. Another way that we can begin to potentially invite some more plumpness into our psoas is by allowing more expansiveness to our breath. So if you were to remember that the psoas connects right behind our lower rib cage, You may also remember that this is also where our diaphragm connects, our muscle for breathing. And so if you were to see if you could send your breath all the way down into that little corner of the back of your ribs where your diaphragm meets your rib cage. And if you were to breathe like a little bit of puff of air into that little crawl space. And then let that air go out through your lips in slow motion. And if that feels okay, just noticing if you can feel into that rhythm a little bit more. And as you practice this variation of a low and slow breath, you might even notice that echo all the way down into where your psoas connects to your thigh bone. You might notice it in your pelvic floor. And as long as it doesn't feel distressing, just letting any movement, any tremoring or shaking or twitching that needs to happen. Sometimes it can feel really good to just like shake out our pelvis. That can be a beautiful way to let out unresolved stress and survival energy. You can also feel free to shake your legs in and out, up and down. Another variation I like to do is kind of just imagine like my legs are on a pogo stick on the ceiling, shaking them out that way. Riding a big bicycle, swaying side to side. There's really no right or wrong movement here. In terms of our psoas muscle, if it's not overextending it, movement is really good for it. It also creates that hydration, that lubrication, giving it some fresh oxygenated blood. And so feel free to take as much time as you need to let out some shakes, some shimmies, and then noticing what you notice. Does there feel like maybe even just a little bit more length? And the next invitation is with our block. You can also use 2 blocks if you need more surface area, or you can use a bolster or a pillow if you want more softness. And the invitation is to come up into a bridge pose and place that block underneath your sacrum. And again, if you want 2 blocks side to side, however you want to do it, feel free. And then I'm going to invite one knee up towards my chest, and I'm going to hold on behind that hamstring here. And then I'm going to extend my other leg long and really feel like I'm reaching my heel out away from me. And I'm pulling my hamstring in order to protect my lower back and really find this opening in my hip flexor. And then I'm going to gently feel like my heel is sweeping the ground, right to left, left to right. That movement might be 1 inch, it might be 1 centimeter. Just moving that heel in and out, in and out. And then notice if we can lift the heel a little bit and then lower the heel, but still inviting that hamstring towards you. So we're not stretching into the lower back. We're finding this stretch in our hip flexor. And that heel probably won't touch the earth, and that's okay. That's not the goal. The goal is awakening and enlivening and hydrating this part of our body in a new way. Breathing in, breathing out. And And eventually, when you're ready, just bringing that lower foot back to the ground. You can let go of that hamstring and then just remove the block and send your legs long, just to take a moment to notice if or how you notice any difference between the leg that you kind of dangled and swept with. This might be one of those moments where you're like, I don't feel anything at all, and that's okay. That's something to notice. You might notice a drastic difference. So just checking in. And then eventually, if that feels okay to try the other side, going ahead and finding that bridge pose, letting that block come underneath your sacrum. And the first thing is first, bending the other knee and taking the back of that hamstring. This allows a little gentle tuck in our pelvis to protect our spine. And then we want to think about that heel reaching really far away from us, almost like someone was gently pulling that heel away from us. And then it starts to gently maybe find its way towards the earth. And then maybe we sweep it to the right, to the left on the earth. In and out. Getting some side to side action. And then maybe there's a tiny little lift. And then exhale, lowers down towards the ground, maybe a little bit more. Again, the goal is not to touch the ground. If you are touching the ground, you might want to lift your hips a little bit higher off of the floor or pull that hamstring in towards you a little bit more. Breathing in, breathing out. Now go ahead and lower that foot, lower the other foot, remove that block, and then extending both legs long. You can even feel free to place your hands on the front of your hips and pelvis, just as another way of creating some biofeedback, remembering this place in your body, saying hello. And then as you're here, I invite you to feel as though you were a frog, kind of bending your knees up and extending the legs long. So you're kind of like swimming upside down frog, as much as feels okay for you. If that doesn't feel great in your hips, don't do it. Feel free to listen to your body. And then placing your feet very far apart, go ahead and find some really big windshield wipers with your knees. You can even press off of that back leg, lifting that hip. That's going to give you another little stretch and lengthen on the front of that hip flexor potentially. That might feel good. Finding your way left to right, right to left. And then maybe as you press that right leg, you might even stretch that right arm all the way up. And so you're kind of like getting this spiral action through your whole body. You can even use your opposite hand to help you spiral and twist a little bit more. And then feel free to come back through center press into the left leg. Maybe that left arm reaches up and that right arm can gently invite a little tug, a little spiral. Just finding some creative movement here, seeing if you can indwell your psoas in whatever way feels good for you. And then eventually, I'll invite you to other movement, but I invite you right now to just take some time to feel into any movements your body might want to make. And that might mean that you pause this video and you move on your own for a very long time in a very particular way. This other option is a little pretzel-y. So if you need to pause the video and take it slow as we go, feel free. So I'm going to take my left leg, I'm going to bend it so that my left heel reaches towards my right sits bone and my left knee is reaching away from me. And it's almost like I'm imagining someone pulling that knee away from me. And then I'm going to take my right foot, if it's accessible, and press it gently into the ball of my left foot. So I'm kind of rotating my foot out a little bit, kind of supinating it. And then I'm going to reach my left arm up. So I'm getting this really, for me, it's a pretty intense stretch throughout my left side body. Another variation is to take your right hand and hold your left wrist and gently give it a tug. When I'm engaging my psoas, I like to keep my stretches a little more active. So I actually like to prefer to use my left arm a little bit more to reach. Then I'm going to take this right knee, I'm going to cross it over my body, coming into like a little bit of a half frog posture here. So that right knee is out to the side. My left knee is bent, and now my heel is reaching up to the sky. And I'm going to try to press my left heel up into the sky. So right now I'm doing an active version of what we've been doing sort of more passively, and I'm lengthening the front of my left hip flexor, reaching that heel up into the sky. And then I'm going to gently windshield wiper that heel left to right, right to left. And then I'm going to leave my legs right where they are. I'm going to extend that left leg long, and then I'm going to reach my right arm back behind me for a whole body twist. Maybe my chin follows along my right hand, letting my neck be a part of the stretch. And then I'm going to inhale that right arm all the way up and above my head, coming all the way over onto my belly. And then I'm going to press my hands into the earth, lengthening through the front of my body. Exhale, lowering back down, rolling all the way back onto my back. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'll walk you through it. So I'm taking my right leg, I'm bending it as my right heel reaches towards my left sits bone. Then I'm going to take my left heel and gently press it, if it can reach, into the ball of my right foot. So I'm sort of getting a little bit of a supination, and I can feel that all the way up into my hip. So just noticing. And then reaching your right knee down and away from you, and your right arm up and around. And for you, it might feel good to take that wrist into that left hand and stretch it, or maybe you prefer to also keep it a little bit more active, stretching through that right arm, breathing in, breathing out. Good. Now I'm going to take this left leg, let it come all the way over my body into a half frog on the side, and I'm bending into my right knee with my heel. My right heel's up in the sky, and then I'm going to press that heel up into the sky. So I'm taking a more active variation of that stretch and that length in the front of that hip flexor. And then I'm going to let that ankle, that heel go right to left, left to right. And then I'm going to lengthen it, keeping my legs right where they are. I'm going to inhale my left arm all the way up and back, getting a full body twist. Maybe my chin follows that left hand if possible. And then I'm going to inhale that left arm all the way up and around, rolling onto my belly, pressing into my hands, lengthening through the front of my body. Feel free to roll or circle or shake your neck in any way that feels good. And then rolling all the way back over onto your back, making a really big giant letter X. And then I'm going to press into my right heel, so much so that my right hand tries to reach over towards my left. And then I'm going to let that go. And then I'm going to press my left heel, so much so that maybe my left hand reaches over towards my right. And let that go. And if that feels good, maybe take a couple more variations on each side. Breathing in, breathing out, maybe noticing the echo of your psoas through the rest of your body. If it is constricted and tight and fatigued, we may feel that elsewhere as well. So just noticing, and then eventually, when you're ready, letting yourself come into a final resting posture, letting your arms and legs just be long and wide, maybe softening and closing your eyes, and then just tuning back in to those suspenders. Do they feel a little bit more awake? Maybe they feel like they're pulsing. They might feel a little bit more open and lengthened. You might notice no difference at all. Remembering that this is a practice. I believe that movement requires hope and the belief that things can be different, even if they're not right now. So just noticing what you notice, feeling what you feel. Maybe coming back to noticing if you can send your breath all the way down to that nook and cranny where your diaphragm meets the back, the inside of your rib cage and your spine. Sending your breath into the floor. And maybe sighing it out. Maybe taking in the deepest breath you've taken so far today. And maybe letting it out even more. And because our psoas can hold a lot and you've maybe released a lot, I invite you to drink a lot of water and rest as much as you need to for the next 24 to 48 hours as you continue to take really good care of your really, really good psoas.